content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior and the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families. Tonight, we're stepping into one of the most scrutinized and debated events in American history, an event that changed the trajectory of this country in just 8 seconds. I'm talking about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. So pour yourself a glass of wine of your favorite Merlot and settle in with me, my special guest Mike Rothmiller, and former Marine sniper Craig Roberts as we roll up our sleeves and hold onto that logic hat as we head down this twisty trail of lies, cover-up, and conspiracies. As if this case was just one big magic bullet, right? Well, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader. And tonight I wanted to kind of look at, November 22nd is this Friday. It's also my husband's birthday. So happy birthday, Dave. But I wanted to kind of get the logistics and the actual facts of what happened during the assassination on President John F. Kennedy. Now, there's a lot of conspiracies floating around and things like that, but we just got to look at the facts. And the reason why I'm so interested in this case is because the report that we got from the government on the assassination of JFK did not make sense to me. Nothing made sense. It didn't look factual. It didn't look scientific or nothing. So that's why I think this assassination in this case has been still going on to this day, and we still don't have absolute answers. But I have Craig Roberts, who is a former Marine sniper, a former police officer, so he knows what he's talking about. And I also have our recurring guest, Mike Rothmiller, who is an expert on the Kennedy assassination as well. And they are both longtime friends, so I'm happy to have them on the show. Welcome to the show, Craig and Mike.
Pleasure to meet you.
Yes. Now, I just wanted to tell my audience, I apologize for the timing off on this video. I know it looks like I'm in a kung fu movie. I don't know what's wrong. I have to update it and get it fixed, but just bear with me. We're just going to have fun with this episode. So, Craig, you wrote the book Kill Zone about the assassination at on Dealey Plaza that day. And you kind of go through the ballistics and the actual facts in the book. And Mike Rothmiller, we've had him on before. You're an expert like everything Kennedy. But I wanted to get you guys on just to kind of have a discussion and kind of prove the facts that the report gave us, prove them wrong, because like I said, it doesn't make sense to me. So Craig, if you want to kind of enlighten us on what you think that happened during that day.
Well, there's quite a bit of things that happened, but things that we were told that didn't happen that did happen. So the whole thing's kind of a hairball when you look at it until you start really getting into it and sorting it out. What happened was, I was in high school. I mean, everybody knows that we're alive. It was alive then. It was old enough to remember what happened on that day. It was a Friday. We were in school, and here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at 11:30, they came on and they told us that president had been shot in Dallas, and he was on his way to the hospital, and so on and so forth. Um, and then later, of course, we had the whole Lee Harvey Oswald thing that Oswald did it. And then Ruby kills Oswald, case closed. And I believe that even when I went through Vietnam and all the other things through my life up until the early 1980s. And I was in police air support then, and I was in the helicopter unit. And we had a law enforcement pilots association meeting in Dallas. And I had to fly one of our birds down there and park it in front of the hotel as a kind of a show and tell gate bird because it was brand new. And on Saturday, I didn't see anything I wanted to do or go to. So I just looked at the map and I saw that Dealey Plaza wasn't that far away. And I thought, well, I'll go look at this. And so I went over there, and there's two things that impressed me. The first was how small it was. It's not a very big place at all. And then the second one, they had just opened up the sixth floor museum, and I went up there and I read the displays, and you could call that the Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself Memorial Museum, because 90% of it is all that. So I got over to the window and I looked out. And now you can't go to the window they said that he used. It's glassed in, but you can go to the one right next to it. And I looked down, and the first thing that came to my mind was, no way this is going to happen. On what they said happened, they said that he fired 3 rounds in 5.6 seconds from a Mannlicher 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano, which is a piece of junk weapon to begin with, at a moving vehicle going downhill around a bend and through and on the other side of trees. And then I looked out the other side to the south, and there was a window right there where they made the 90-degree turn to go down that street, and it was a clear shot. And they had to come to almost to a stop to make that turn. That's where I would have done it if I was going to do it. Well, he didn't do it that way. He did it this other way because the kill zone happened to be exactly where I would set up a 3 crossfire ambush, and that's obviously after all the years of investigating I did in it, I read all the books, and found it was basically simple, that's what had to happen for everything to add up and match. Then I started looking at the details, and there are several details in this thing that happened on that day that a lot of people don't know about. They got the government's version, but they didn't actually see the truth. And I'll give you just a few examples. They may not be in order because we don't have all day. But let's look at the Tippit killing. Okay, Officer Tippit pulls into Oswald's driveway after the assassination and hopped 3 times at the rooming house where he'd been staying. Well, he had already left. He'd already been there and left. He was on his way to the Texas Theater. Backs up and leaves. And the next time we find Tippit, he's dead in his police car, halfway to the Texas Theater, and they blame it on Oswald because supposedly it was a 38, which it was, but it wasn't his. His Snub-Nose 38 was inoperable when they got him, and they got it in a broken firing pin. They couldn't operate. So then I find out that what really happened, 2 guys were talking to Tippit. They're wearing suits. One of them pulls a gun and shoots him, and they leave. Okay. What they didn't do was pick up their brass. And the rounds that were found in the street were 38 Super. Well, 38 Super cannot work in a revolver. It's a rimless cartridge. It's like a rifle cartridge. There's no rim to hold it in the chamber. So that gun couldn't happen. But the favored gun of the CIA at that time was a 38 Super. And so we look at that. And a little bit later, if we get time, let's talk about Roscoe White. Hardly anybody's heard of Roscoe White.
I've never heard of him. But Mike, now during the day that when Kennedy was assassinated, what kind of, and going through the reports and stuff after all the information came out, what was your kind of thought process when you were seeing all this information and saying it's Lee Harvey Oswald, he worked alone, he was the one gunman? What was your kind of rationality of the situation?
Well, at first, like everybody else, I believed the story that went around until I became a policeman. Then I started having questions because I would see shootings and different things happen. And then I'd also see how investigations were corrupted by the chief of police, a high ranking officer, whatever. And several years back, I started pulling the information on the Kennedy shooting. And the first thing I did was pull the telephone transcripts of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the day after the shooting. This was before a Warren Commission was thought of, mentioned, and in it, he dictated the outcome of the investigation before it started. And that's the worst thing you can do in any investigation is have command influence, because they tell you how they want the investigation to come out. So the Warren Commission, thick book, they did a lot of work, but they always had the objective. They had to do what LBJ wanted, saying it was Oswald, it wasn't the Russians, it wasn't the mafia, it wasn't this. But then if you read it at the end of it, they say, however, we do think it's a conspiracy, which is interesting that they officially said that. Then you have to look at other things that occurred when JFK went into office. One of the first things he did was establish an executive action group within the CIA to carry out assassinations. So you look at that and you say, okay, he's got guys to carry out an assassination. They may turn that on him someday. And what I have in one book that I published is that I have LBJ's transcripts. I also have a list of CIA assassins. I got that document from the CIA. And these were assassins during the time. And you look at that and you say, here are the names of assassins they were using to carry out killings worldwide. What else is interesting is about in 76, 78, a doctor got a hold of me, an MD, and I lived by the beach, and he worked in the same area, and he knew my background, and he was one of the doctors in the emergency room when they brought in JFK. He was doing his residency there, and he said he was standing next to Jackie, holding Jackie, and so forth. And he says every doctor in the ER, when they brought in JFK, that bullet wound in the lower throat here, they all said, that's an entrance wound. Every single one of them, that's how they treated it. And so he said that was turned around on all of it later on, saying, no, that's not an entrance wound. He said it was. And another thing I have is I have documents I was able to obtain from the CIA that said that they clearly say that Lee Harvey Oswald was an asset of theirs. When he went to Russia, supposedly defecting, he was working for the CIA then and funneling information back. And then I saw some intelligence reports regarding Jack Ruby. The question's always been, how did Ruby get into the police station? And there's a lot of ways he got in there, but he compromised a lot of cops of various ranks by supplying them prostitutes, free drinks, and so forth. And the intelligence report said that there was probably at least 8 to a dozen policemen within Dallas that day at the station of different ranks knew he was going to come in to shoot Oswald. And Oswald had a lot of contacts with the mob. That's already proven. So you start adding all of this up and you start seeing huge holes in the Warren report where, like I said, it doesn't make sense. So you go, oh, come on, who's going to believe that? And then recently, when the last year, Landis came out, who was the Secret Service agent with Jackie Kennedy then at the hospital, and he said he found the bullet, this magic bullet that didn't exist before. He found the bullet in the limousine right behind where JFK was seated. And that would make sense because if you examine it, if he shot here in the front, the bullet wound came out down below his shoulder blade. So it had to be coming down like this. It didn't hit him in the back and then come up and then go down again. It's just impossible. So there's a lot of things that have come up. And then I had a long chat with RFK Jr. about this too. And all three of us with Craig were all on the same page that what they said is not what really happened.
Right. And when you look back at the Warren report, and like I've actually looked back at like Jim Garrison, who was the district attorney or worked for the district attorney of New Orleans. And he actually brought the case to court. He was trying to shed light on this conspiracy, that it wasn't just Lee Harvey Oswald, that there were multiple shooters, but he was so shunned all the time. But at least he got to present his case in court, which I believe was probably really beneficial to the American public, because we started really questioning our government, like what are they actually doing behind the scenes? And now, did you guys ever follow Jim Garrison or look up like kind of his casework and kind of see the trajectory he was going with the case, kind of, because it seems like it aligns with what you guys think as well. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, uh, let me back up a little bit, because I got home from Dallas, and I had
Okay.
just happened at one time or other recorded a VHS tape of the Zapruder film, which I know the Zapruder film has been altered after Life magazine got it. But what I saw was a shot from the front. Now, the way I know this is because when you see the shot in slow motion, it comes in to the right side of the head, okay, and it explodes out this way. So
Hmm.
sideways, it's going like this, okay.
Yep.
That does not happen with a shot coming through from the rear.
No.
Shot coming through is a cone shape going out this direction. Where
Exactly.
what I saw, and we knew about this in Vietnam, the ones of us that knew about sniping stuff, and we knew, and right then, as soon as I saw that, I knew who did it. Of course, you can't prove it, but I'll tell you about that in a second.
Ooh.
It was a mercury-filled hollow point, because what happens is this. You take a hollow point, you drill it out to make a bigger cavity, you fill it with mercury, you cover it up with either paraffin or liquid solder. You load it
Okay.
into a case, you're ready to go. When you shoot it, what the bullet does, it expands out like this and then explodes this way, going up and down, and everything
Okay.
goes in, all the mercury goes in, and it's like a shotgun goes through and it blows a bigger hole out the back, which is exactly what happened. Now,
Okay.
jumping many years later, I'm talking to one of the doctors I was given a speech down at the November in Dallas thing that they have every year down there. I was one of the speakers and do book signings and stuff. And one of the doctors that was in the ER brought the X-rays, and he says, "Yeah," he said, "we must have had some problems with the X-ray machine that way, because it shows all these little tiny white spots in there." I says, "Your X-ray machine's fine. That's
Mhm.
mercury." And the only guy that we knew that used those for as an assassination was a guy named Lucien Sarti. Now, Lucien Sarti was Corsican mafia, had direct
Okay.
ties to the Italian mafia over here, and Trafficante and Giancana and all those guys. And he had two other guys, okay, George Bocardini and Xavier Peronte. But anyway, Sarti was the one in my opinion, my professional opinion, was the one that was the shooter from the front, because his code name was the Jackal. He had tried to assassinate uh, de Gaulle. He was in the OAS, which is the French anti-de Gaulle organization back in the day when they were trying to pull every French out of Algeria. Um,
Okay.
that's a long rabbit trail, but that's what I saw. And then the shot from the front, uh, it didn't. It originally it looked to me like it was a 22. I talked to this doctor, and he said we had no exit wound. It went into the front. The shot from the
Hmm.
back probably came from the Dallas Records building and hit Kennedy in the back, but didn't go in very far. They didn't want it to. They wanted to be found, and I think it worked its
Hmm.
way out to where Mike said it was. And the reason is
Okay.
it had really nice rifling on it. Well, in the 1970s, late 70s, there was a man working on top of the Dallas County Records building right where the shot would have come from, up on the roof, working on the air conditioning. He peeled some tar paper back, and there was a 30-06 case there, dated 1963. It was empty.
What?
Okay? And it had a rolled lip on the front, which told me that it was a sabot shot. A sabot shot's where you take a smaller caliber bullet and you load it into a bigger case, and you've got this sabot plastic lining around it that comes off after you shoot it. And my theory, and it's just my theory, is that somebody took that rifle, that Carcano, and they shot it into a pool of water somewhere. They recovered it. They put it, loaded it in that 30-06 case with very little powder, just enough to put it down range and have it hit him, but not really do a lot of damage, and still maintain the rifling of the Carcano. Now you got the magic bullet. And later they say, well, they found it on a stretcher. I get two versions of that. Do they find it on his stretcher? Do they find it on Conley's stretcher? I'm along with Mike. I think they found it on the car and moved it to the stretcher.
It's so weird how like all these little tiny details that happen, like just moving the bullet from the car to the gurney. It's just like that little thing basically just was part of this big conspiracy of the death of JFK. And it's baffling to me. And it seems like the moment that he was shot, the next few days, it seemed like everything was rushed. Things weren't done properly. People were getting, like you had the Secret Service, they were fighting over Kennedy's body, whether he was going to stay in Texas or go to DC. I mean, it just seemed like it was just chaos. And to know that all these little intricate details changing the narrative for the Warren Commission report, it baffles me. And to say that if a bullet entered the back of your head and it exploded, it would have to have a secondary type of explosive device on it, because a bullet does not hit and explode. It goes through. So if he had the backside of his head blown off, it would make sense that the bullet came from the front. It's just logic. And I can't believe that the government, how dumb the American public was to believe that.
When I was in Dallas, they had a guy that was a physicist. And that's all he was. He was a physicist. And, his deal was mathematics. And he gave this presentation about what he called the jet effect, that it came in the back of the head, built up pressure, blew out the front, and that's why his head goes back like that. Wrong answer. Your head doesn't go back like that when you get hit. No. It goes back like that when you get hit in the front. So I talked to him later, and I said, how many people have you killed? He said, well, none. Why? So you've never really shot anybody in the head to see what really happens. He says, well, of course not. And I said, well, I've been there and done that. Let me tell you something right now. That doesn't happen. What I want you to do is go home, get yourself a cantaloupe, put it on a fence post, hit it with a baseball bat, see what direction it goes. That's physics.
Exactly. I know. It's just science. And to sit there and change this narrative when it completely doesn't make sense. I'm just baffled that this was fed to the American public and became actual fact as the assassination of JFK. And it just smells all fishy. It stinks. It's rank of fish. And, I'm glad that there's people like you guys really digging deep. And it's not the question of who killed Kennedy. It's why and how the government covered it up, and the crap that they can do to hide things from us is kind of scary, if you ask me. So, Mike, did you, when you were started looking through the evidence, what was kind of like, what were you kind of more honed in on looking at were you looking more at the ballistic side of things? Were you looking more like the police report itself? What was kind of your process on researching what actually happened to JFK?
Well, it was primarily looking at the ballistics to a point, but what they were saying, everything that occurred around the assassination, and then trying to verify that. They said, well, Oswald was in Mexico City, went to the Cuban embassy and the Russian and so forth. Well, they had photos of the guy who did that. It's not Oswald. And even I have the transcript of Hoover speaking to LBJ saying, yeah, the guy who's supposed to be Oswald Mexico City is not him. It's not the same guy. His voice doesn't match. The photograph doesn't match. So that tells you that if his voice doesn't match, they had a bug in the Soviet and Cuban embassy then, that they could record whoever's in there, what they're talking about. And the photograph doesn't look anything like the Lee Harvey Oswald that they arrested. So you start seeing things like that, but you start questioning other aspects of it. And then you start to backtrack, getting into it deeper, and you start going, wait a minute. Is there a deep state? Sure there is. I've known many people who were flag officers, generals now. They said, I never thought there was until I reached that rank, got to the flag. Then I realized there is a deep state. And so you look at that and say, now, did they want to have a reason to kill him? Sure. He wanted to destroy the CIA over the Bay of Pigs situation and other things. So the CIA had everything to lose, and especially the people there. So you start looking to those individuals and seeing what they've said in their telephone conversations and other places where it's not, if you want to say, an official investigation, but they're discussing it and what they're going to do. And you start seeing a lot of cover up and a lot of misdirection, a lot of misinformation. And you have to say, well, wait a minute, who's doing this? It's the government. And then you say, why are they doing it? Well, they're covering up what they did, but they're also protecting themselves by doing it. Because the last thing, well, the CIA intelligence service want is somebody coming in and clamping down on them, because they look at a president as just, the guy's here for 4 years, maybe 8. We'll tell him what we want him to hear. We won't tell him anything more. We'll do our best thing. And so they're protecting themselves, and by taking him out, they were certainly protecting themselves at the time.
Well, right. And, it just seemed like, too, a lot of people benefited from Kennedy dying. And, he wanted to dismantle the CIA, but then you also had, Vietnam was chomping at his back too. Cause like everybody, they were trying to pressure him to go into Vietnam, and he just didn't want to go. He's like, but it's just kind of funny how once he's gone and all of a sudden we're in Vietnam under LBJ's watch. It just, I don't know. I feel like there's probably, and I've discussed this with Mike. There's probably like everyone says there was 3 shooters. There's probably 1 shooter from each group of people that would benefit from Kennedy being gone. You had the mafia, the CIA, you had, the federal government, the military wanting to, go to war and things like that. So it just seems like it was kind of a stew of stuff to get rid of Kennedy. And unfortunately that happened, but we're got to take a quick break. But when we come back, I want to hear about Roscoe. That was his name, Roscoe?
Yeah, Roscoe White. And I want to talk to you about National Security Memorandums 263 and 273.
Perfect. We'll talk about that right when we get back from the break. Guess what's back? That's right. The Paranormal 60 swag shop is back. Of course, we have the ever-popular Paranormal 60 tees with all the sayings we know and love. Plus, we have new and improved travel mugs, a new improved hoodie, and a brand new product. You gotta rock the croc with the Paranormal 60 foam slip-on shoes. All you gotta do is go to theparanormal60.com, click the swag shop tab at the top of the page. As you can see, this is where you can purchase Dave's book bundle. You can get The Other Side and Theater of the Mind, both signed for just $40. But if you want to go to our swag shop, just scroll up and click the merch button, which will take you to our Paranormal 60 swag shop, where you can purchase all the new items and your favorite items all in one place. Thank you so much for all your support. And remember, Darklings, stay spooky. Okay, and we're back from the break. Craig wanted to talk about this Roscoe White character and how he kind of weaved his way into the whole conspiracy of the Kennedy assassination. So tell us a little bit about this Roscoe White character.
Okay, Roscoe White was with Lee Harvey Oswald in the Marines in the Philippines. Okay. And he knew they were good friends. And Roscoe White was in Dallas. He was a new rookie on the Dallas Police Department, but they had him working in the photo lab for some reason, which My sources tell me that he was in there when the Life magazine picture showing Oswald holding the Carcano on the cover of Life magazine had been altered. And so that makes me think that he may have been involved in that. But Roscoe had a code name, and the code name was Mandarin. And I've got the 2 telegrams that his son, Ricky White, found in the house after Roscoe had been killed. And there were messages to Mandarin, and they're in the book Kill Zone, and you can read them. And it tells them that the location had been changed. It was going to be in Dallas, and a lot more information like that, telling Roscoe that Kennedy's going to be in Dallas. That was going to be in Houston. And before that, it was going to be in Florida. But those 2 places didn't work out. And so they moved it to Dallas. The day before that Air Force One, the alleged Air Force One, that's another story, landed and Kennedy and Jackie arrived. The day before, the mayor of Dallas changed the route of the vehicles going to the World Trade Center. So they made that 120 that turn up there by the Dallas Schoolbook Depository and went down that street, which put them in the kill zone. The other 2 streets were too far away. It wouldn't work. There was no cover and concealment over there. So Roscoe was heavily involved in this. He knew Lee Harvey Oswald. He was there at the time. He was working for the Dallas Police Department. And the messages to Mandarin, his son, got. Well, Roscoe, after this was over, he had to have a cover. So he became a welder. And it wasn't long before his welding tanks blew up while he was using them. I did a book called JFK, The Dead Witnesses, and it goes into all the others, but that's another story. But the thing about it is, almost every witness that was able to have information to testify in any of the investigations either committed suicide or had an accident.
Right. Yeah, I know. There was a few. There was I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but there was a gal that I believe she was murdered, wasn't she, or found dead? She had some information, I believe, on Jack Ruby. But yeah, it just seemed like everybody who knew something all of a sudden had an accident or committed suicide. It just I'm sorry.
Dorothy Kilgallen was the lady that
okay, yeah. I was trying to remember her name, but yeah, so and I could understand, like, knowing if you saw something, the fear of coming forward. It just seemed like everyone was getting picked off that knew something and wanted to say something. So this Roscoe White, obviously, he was he part of the whole conspiracy itself, or was he just kind of
he was an asset.
The wrong place?
Yeah, he was an asset. He was just one.
Okay.
There were several involved in this. I can prove that rifle was never used that day, and I can show you how they altered all the records on it to make it look like it was used that day. A Mannlicher Carcano has a 6-shot, what they call an en-bloc clip. Now, an en-bloc clip is a clip 6 bullets in it, you shove it into the magazine, you work the bolt, and then when you fire the last round, the clip falls out the bottom. No clip was found on the 6th floor, and you can't operate the rifle without it. Well, these people didn't know that, so they had to come up with a clip. And when they did, they came up with one that was made 2 years later in the United States. It wasn't an Italian clip, and it appeared the Warren Commission. But I've got also, there was only 2 cases found, but that had been changed in the Warren report to 3 cases, and I've got the original report showing 2 cases found. And then I've got the one that was turned in to the Warren Commission where that had been altered to 3 cases found. There's just tons of anomalies in this whole thing as you go through it. But, when Mike and I know how to dig into the rat holes and the corners and dig stuff out. And we follow all these rabbit trails, and we did it in law enforcement. And most people won't do that. In the Kennedy research organization group, whatever they want to call these guys that write, they all try to write a book reinforcing their theory. The mafia did it. The Cubans did it. The CIA did it. Well, guess what? All of them were involved at one point or another somewhere along the trail.
Right. I know. It's like everybody's kind of got their fingerprints on the assassination of JFK because, like I said, everybody would benefit if he wasn't in office. And that's very unfortunate because the American public loved JFK. He was just one of those charismatic presidents that everybody loved. I mean, I know Kennedy had his haters. I mean, we all know what political division can do to a country. But he just seemed like this likable character that people, even though they may not have agreed with him, they seemed to like him, except the underbelly of the people that knew the inner workings of the government and dealing with Cuba, dealing with Russia. It just, I honestly feel bad for JFK because it's like no matter what he did, it was going to be a wrong decision. And like with the Bay of Pigs and that whole fiasco, I feel like that was kind of the nail in the coffin for him. And unfortunately, we had to lose a president in a very traumatic way. And it wasn't a peaceful transfer of power, that was for sure. Craig, you also alluded that you wanted to talk about a specific, was it a specific thing in the commission report that you wanted to discuss?
National Security Action Memorandum 263 and 273. National Security Memorandum 263 was Kennedy's memorandum written about a week and a half before the assassination, taking us out of Vietnam at 1,000 troops a month. Okay. He was taking us out of Vietnam. And then he got killed. On Tuesday, the day after his funeral, the following Tuesday, Johnson and McGeorge Bundy issued National Security Memorandum 273, which is 4 pages, putting us into Vietnam and Laos. Laos is very important. And telling DOD what they're going to do, USAID what they're going to do, CIA what they're going to do. It's all in there. And I've got it in the book Kill Zone. I've got the whole thing there. Anyway, National Security Memorandum 273 put us into Vietnam, where a lot of people made a lot of money. Bell Helicopter, Colt Firearms, Ford Motor Company, Chrysler Motor Company. We lost 6,000 helicopters. And Bell had the main contract of Hueys. And they replaced, that's 12,000. And most of them we left in Vietnam when we pulled out. So a lot of people made a lot of money. And I did a lot of research on through the archives. I'm trying to find out who held the controlling interest of Colt, who owned the controlling interest of Bell Helicopter. Well, Bell Helicopter controlling interest is held by Lady Bird Johnson. So, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And then I tried to find out about Ford and Chrysler at the time. They were making Jeeps and tanks and stuff like that. They lost the records. They didn't know. I said, wait a minute. We got records going back to tell people how to shoe a mule in the cavalry in 1880s, and we can't find these. And they said, well, we don't know where they're at. So anyway, that's where that goes. So 263 put us into Vietnam, and a few days later, 273 took us out of Vietnam. 273 put us into Vietnam. And when I said Laos, that's important because the CIA had a huge drug market going on, getting opium out of Laos, and it went back all the way to World War II, to Team 101, all the way back to World War II, because they were funding a lot of things with black funds. And black funds you don't have to account for. You can do anything you want to with them. And that's, we're talking millions upon millions of dollars back then, which would be billions today.
Right. And that's the one thing too. Like people, when we are at war, there's money being made like by the billions. You have all these subcontractors, people, for helicopters, weapons, all that stuff. And, a lot, like you said, a lot of people financially benefited from the war in Vietnam. And, that's kind of sad that we have to go to war for certain people to make money. But I really feel that was kind of the real reason why they wanted Kennedy gone, was because he wanted to shake up Capitol Hill. He wanted to say, no, we're not going to do it. No, I want to dismantle the CIA. And it's scary to know that the government can manipulate a narrative like this and have it be placed as fact to the American public, and then the American public is just gullible to say, okay. And you got to question everything. So what, Mike and Craig, what is kind of some of the things that you came across that were like you shocked? You were like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was involved. Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you that kind of shocked you when going through all the reports and the research that you guys have done?
Well, for me, I think it was initially when I was working intelligence, I saw a report, a highly classified one, that talked about the cops allowing Jack Ruby to come in to kill Oswald. And so, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why did that happen? And that led me into other things over the years. And I think probably the one that was most interesting to me is that reading LBJ's transcripts after the day after the killing, and he says, "This is what it's got to say." Any investigation, and plus the AG did it then too. Said it's got to say this, and that's it. Oswald, one shooter, no matter what. We got to climb down on the doctors. That's one thing at the hospital. That's why they certainly didn't want the autopsy to be performed in Texas, even though it's state law. Get it out of there. You can't manipulate it. And another thing I found interesting not long ago when I was digging through some archives is that when they did the autopsy on JFK, and most people, I don't think have ever heard this, but they put his body in a chair, set him up like he was in the car. And you've probably seen in the past where they use like welding rods and they'll put it through a bullet hole to see. They did that on his body to see the track of the bullets. Now, the archives still have those photos, but they won't release them. And it just buried that information. And I came across it by accident. And it was talking about the photographer who took those photos. He says, yeah, they put the rods in him. He was sitting in a chair, and we took photos of him to see where the trajectory of the bullets. Now, if we could get our hands on those photos, it would say a lot, because you're going to see some things. Yeah, you're going to see things. There's no magic bullet. You're not going to bend a rod and go out, and it will tell a lot. But then you look at it and say, okay, why are they keeping that secret? Why that has never been released? Why hasn't all the documents been released? Well, I think from what I've learned over the years is that it's going to point a lot to the deep state and the CIA. Yeah. But then again, the CIA, the people that they weren't so stupid that they'd say, on such date, we killed Kennedy, and here's Larry who did it, and so forth. They're going to bury that information, but hopefully there'll be bits and pieces, enough of it where you can put that puzzle together. But those documents still haven't been released.
That's crazy. I had no idea they did that to him. Yeah, and those photographs would show a lot, because it would probably show the correct trajectory of where the bullets came from. Craig, was there anything that you came across that kind of like shocked you or just made your jaw drop?
Well, the whole thing did, actually, because that's not what we were led to believe. And when I started following some of the trails, especially the trail that went over to Laos, I found out that the guy named Ted Shackley of the CIA and his cohorts were in charge of running the drugs out of Laos, and it went to 3 different directions. But first, it went to the Pepsi Cola bottling plant that was set up in Vientiane, Laos. Now, in Vientiane, this Pepsi Cola bottling plant was set up, but it never bottled Pepsi. All it did was refine opium into heroin, pure heroin. And the guy that set it up, the lawyer that was involved with it, worked for John Mitchell, who later was Attorney General. His name was Richard Nixon.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It gets better. So there were 3 ways that opium left. It went to Australia, it went over to Vietnam, and ended up in the veins of our troops. And it was put into coffins in Saigon. It was flown over there by Nguyen Keys Vietnam Air Force cargo planes to Saigon. Saigon, they would put it into coffins of these shipping containers with bodies in them of American troops and sent to San Francisco, where it was taken out and distributed from there around the Berkeley area during the Peace March days. That all those people were involved in that. So you go the other direction, it was sent to Marseille, France, to a guy named Black Luigi. And Black Luigi was on the team on that. He was also Team 101 when they were there during World War II, and they were using the opium. They were selling the opium to help finance Chiang Kai-shek and finance Ho Chi Minh against the Japanese. Well, when the war ended, they had all this opium that they had as an entire network set up where they could sell, and so the Black Luigi, all of those went to Marseille, France. And from Marseille, France, they came over here on the East Coast. So you had the West Coast of San Francisco, you had the East Coast of New York City, and we saw a movie called The French Connection, and that was that route. The other went to Australia, and then it was scattered to all kinds of different places. And they set up their own banking complex. It was the RBNDD or something like that. I can't remember right offhand. But it was they set it up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and they were laundering all the money there. It just goes on and on. So when you hook the drug aspect in, you got the CIA. You got the CIA in, and you got the Bay of Pigs invasion as well with the Cubans that are mad at Kennedy. And and my theory is, from the bits and pieces I've been able to put together, Oswald was not supposed to have got caught. He went there and he was supposed to be met at the Texas Theater, taken to a local airport there in Dallas. I don't think it was Love Field, but anyway, David Ferry was there. And in the Garrison investigation, you run into David Ferry. He was a pilot. He was there with a twin-engine airplane with the engines running, waiting. He was going to fly him to Mexico. And my theory was they were going to take him down to the CIA's ranch down in Mexico, kill him, bury him in the desert, and swear up and down he went to Cuba. Well, guess what that would do? That would satisfy the Cubans, because the American Cubans, anti-Castro Cubans, because it would give us a reason to really invade Cuba and get rid of Castro. The Mafia, meantime, they would get their casinos back in Cuba. So all these puzzles would start to fit together. Now, a lot of this is theory, and I understand that, but it fits.
Right. It does. There was a reason why Kennedy was assassinated. It's just trying to figure out what, but it's so complex. I mean, you have, like you said, you have CIA, you have drugs, you have the mafia, you have the federal government in the military. I honestly feel like all of them like met in a boardroom and just like planned this thing out. Like everybody who had it in for Kennedy just wanted to plot this whole thing. And it's amazing how this narrative is still stated as fact with all the evidence that has come out. Like, and you guys, I mean, obviously in your book, you have so much detail on how all these pieces tie to Kennedy's assassination. Yeah. And, I always urge my listeners to do your own research. Don't take things for what people tell you they are. Don't just read the headline. Really dig deep. And that's what really got my interest in the Kennedy assassination, was the Oliver Stone movie, JFK. And to know that could really happen is very scary to me. But in conclusion, Craig, what's your synopsis? You obviously know who probably killed them and things like that, or the people that were involved, and I don't want to give too much away in the book, but under conclusion, what do you think that could have been done different that could have kept Kennedy in office? Like what could have happened prior to his assassination that could have changed the whole changed November 22nd, 1963?
The Secret Service could have done its job better.
Okay.
I've worked presidential security when they've come to Tulsa before many times. I worked I did Nixon when he came here. That's how long ago. I've done Clinton and Gore and all the rest of them. But anyway, if the Secret Service does its job the way it's supposed to, They come in and they'll have what's called a jump team. The jump team comes in first, and they go the whole parade route. They check everything, and they'll even weld manhole covers shut. They'll nail windows shut. And they'll send a scout car ahead of time, and place agents along the way. They didn't do that for him this time. And now Johnson knew it was going to happen. And by the way, of all the people who don't remember where they were the day Kennedy got shot, Richard Nixon can't remember where he was, and he was in Dallas. But LBJ was in about the third or fourth car back. Was a white Cadillac, and Senator Ralph Yarborough was with him. And as they rounded the corner, getting ready to go toward the kill zone, Johnson dives to the floor before the first shot's fired. And then Yarborough says, "Hey, what are you doing down there, Lyndon?" And then he heard the shots. And as it turned out, Kennedy and Johnson had a big fight that morning about who was going to ride with him. And he wanted Connally to ride with him. And Johnson wanted Yarborough to ride with him. Yarborough was supposed to have been there, the senator from Texas. And Johnson hated Yarborough. But Kennedy did, and I don't think the word got to the teams that were in the actual teams that were on the sixth floor at the other end of the sixth floor, the West End. I don't think the word got to them that Connally's not there, that Johnson's Yarborough's not there, that Connally's there. I don't think they got the word, and that's how come Connally got hit.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and the whole magic bullet theory, I mean, they said that it was a one bullet, it traveled through. Now, they said it traveled through Kennedy into Connally. Is that correct? Is that the magic bullet? Or was that a second shot?
Yeah,
I can't even remember.
That's right. It was up on the sixth floor, and that's another story. I've got that covered in the
well, I know they made it sound like this bullet was like made from Acme. I'm like, somebody's watching Warner Brothers way too much, because these bullets don't do that. And so, yeah, looking at it now, saying that they were fighting on who got to sit where. So it seemed like they were trying to really put everything into place to make sure that this could get pulled off prior to the first bullet being shot. So Mike, what's kind of your synopsis and kind of gathering all the things together? What do you think could have been done differently to prevent the assassination of James?
Well, if there was somebody who didn't want to see the president being killed, who knew about the plot, if they came forward, which they didn't, but they probably ended up dead. But I also agree with Craig is that the Secret Service made a huge mistake. And was it intentional or just lack of training or what, or experience? They made a huge mistake. And the other thing is that people look back to us, but such a long time ago, the government involving with drug smuggling and so forth, that really doesn't happen anymore. No, it does. When I was working intelligence in the late 70s and early 80s, I was involved in a situation with the CIA. They were smuggling drugs in because the guy that was running all the guns to the Contras in Nicaragua was the head of the Mexican Federales, and I was dealing one-on-one with him. And he even told me that they would allow his drugs. He was a huge cocaine trafficker. They would allow his drugs to be flown into the United States on U.S. planes. And most of them came in through Arizona and California. And interesting enough, I was able to finally get all the government documents showing that it was about 6-7 agencies were involved in this. It was the CIA, the FBI, immigration and that, and Department of Justice, because this guy was also under federal indictment before he became the general federales, and he was living in the U.S., and they would never serve the warrant on him because he was their guy running all the drugs. And he was also involved in a plot to assassinate the president of Mexico. So this is what the CIA was involved in and the federal government, and that was in the early 80s. So could they do it today? Absolutely.
Oh, for sure they could. They probably are. I mean, honestly, it's like It's like, where is all these drugs coming from? Well, somebody's got to be greasing somebody's palm and putting money in it, because you would think today with the technology we have and the security that we have that this would not be happening, but it still is. So obviously there has to be some backdoor in to getting these drugs here from somebody who has authority to say, yes or no.
If the government, if they're protecting somebody, or they want the drugs to come in for this person, like Craig's saying, for black ops, use the money because it's not accountable, there's always a hole they'll make. And most of the time, I know they were flying into military bases because you don't go through customs. And they just fly in, have the trucks unload, and off they go. And nobody is the wiser.
Yeah, it just seems like if you really want to boil it down to, JFK was assassinated for the almighty dollar. I mean, it goes down to money. Who's going to make money? Who's going to benefit from him being out of office? And that isn't American. That's not what we stand for. And I applaud you guys for shedding light with your guys' books. You have Craig Roberts' book. You have The Kill Zone, a sniper's look at Dealey Plaza, and then Reckless, Sex, Lies, and JFK with Mike Rothmiller. I'll have both of those links in today's description. Now, is there a website, Craig, that you have, or is there any way people can get a hold of you or find you if they have any questions?
Sure. Rifle Warrior, all one word, riflewarrior.com.
Riflewarrior.com. And Mike, I will put a link for your author's page on Amazon. You have so many books. I've had you on for Reckless. We just had you on for that. Plus Bombshell, how Bobby Kennedy killed Marilyn Monroe. Man, I'm glad I didn't know the Kennedys. It seems like everybody involved with the Kennedy either ends up in jail or in a grave. So I thank you guys so much for coming on and shedding some light. And like I said, listeners, if you want to look into things like the Kennedy assassination or other conspiracy theories, do the research, look for the opposing, and compare. Don't just take one side and take their word for it. Really do the research. And that's why we have wonderful books like Craig with Kill Zone and Reckless with Mike Rothmiller. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. And thank you all for listening. I hope to see you all next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.